This is the AAOS Career Podcast, part of the Bone Beat Orthopaedic podcast channel. This monthly series features conversations on professional development and growth opportunities within the field of musculoskeletal healthcare.
Hello everyone, I'm Rex Lutz, Chair of the Resident Assembly Executive Committee, and this is the AAOS Career Podcast. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Joseph Daniel, an orthopedic foot and ankle surgeon at the Rothman Orthopaedic Institute. He is also a professor of orthopedic surgery at Thomas Jefferson University. Dr. Daniel is my residency program director, and I'm honored to have him join me today to talk about how we can grow as leaders and succeed in leadership roles as we move through residency and fellowship, and how each of us can develop our own unique leadership styles. Dr. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Dr. Daniel, can you give us a brief timeline of your medical training and military background?
Sure. So I attended medical school at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. I graduated in 1990. I interned at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., and graduated in 1991 as their class president. I then did a 2-year block of time at the Pentagon as the Chief of Professional Services, where I took care of all the generals in the building on Capitol Hill and a number of senators and congressmen. I was accepted to residency at orthopedic surgery at Walter Reed Army Medical Center back in D.C., graduated in 1998, and then I did my fellowship at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay, so you have more experience before residency even started than most of us have in a lifetime. But thank you so much for your service to this country. We all can appreciate you and the sacrifices you've made for us, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
How do you think your military service helped shape both you as a person and ultimately you as a surgeon?
It's an excellent question. I completed a 20-year career on active duty in the United States Army. I retired as a lieutenant colonel, and what I learned through those 20 years was truly how to be an effective leader. I had the opportunity to be led by individuals that I would run into a burning building for. They were that charismatic, but I also learned how to not be an effective leader by having worked for a number of individuals. But in either regard, I did learn pluses and minuses as to how to motivate people and get the very best out of them.
Yeah, that's great. So in the military, there's a chain of command. In residency, there's also a chain of command as you go through the PGY years. Can you explain the similarities between the military chain of command and also the residency chain of command? And maybe for our listeners who aren't familiar with the military chain of command, just give them a little bit of background in that.
Certainly. So there is a distinct chain of command in the military for very specific reasons. But what you ask subordinates to do is to follow this chain of command to try to correct deficiencies or any errors in the system, if you will, prior to pushing it to the highest levels within that chain. Routinely, if an individual designs an effective chain of command, the leader of that organization rarely hears about issues. They're solved at a much lower level. I purposely designed our residency with a chain of command for a number of reasons, primarily because I wanted mid-level and senior level residents to feel comfortable with listening to an issue, making a decision, and taking action on it, because it builds your character. It makes you stronger as a physician and certainly as a surgeon to take command of a situation, similar to the way that senior residents and certainly attendings do in the operating room.
Yeah, I can attest to that within our program. There definitely is that chain of command, and as you develop through the years, you realize that more and you understand it more and appreciate it more, especially now in my chief year, understanding the things that my more senior residents and chiefs were doing in the past. And now I better understand and I appreciate them. And so I think it's very valuable to have those similarities there. So in 2016, you became our residency program director. What was it like to take over the leadership of a program, and what were the challenges associated with that?
Sure. So When I was asked to take over as program director almost 10 years ago, our program unfortunately had 22 citations against it. Really means that the ACG and me was seriously considering canceling our program. The first thing that I did was to identify all the deficiencies, very similar to being a platoon leader in the Army, figure out what the deficiencies are, rally people together who were smarter than me in those specific areas, and then to design a very algorithmic way of approaching each deficiency and correcting it. I think a mistake that leaders make when they take over an area, whether you're a civilian or in the military, is to think that you can correct every problem yourself. You need to delegate authority to a degree by giving greater responsibility to those that are working with you and perhaps for you. But at the end of the day, you are ultimately responsible for the outcome of the decisions you make as a leader to affect change.
You bring up a good point about delegating that authority and giving a sense of responsibility to everybody involved in the program. I at least notice it in our program, and I'm sure other programs across the country can notice this. When people are involved and feel the sense of being included and having an influence on the residents, I think it makes for a more rewarding residency and process, and everybody is just so involved and truly cares about the residents that they're training. You can definitely see that throughout our program, and I think it makes it more rewarding for the residents when the attendings have that sense of need to help drive the program forward.
Agree. I think it's important to note that in general, people want to be heard and they want to help. And if you listen to an individual and then rally people together towards that common goal, they'll usually come up with remedy for an error. If you simply tell people what to do, that is a form of more of an autocratic form of leadership, but a more democratic form of leadership in most situations, aside from wartime situations and certain times in the operating room. But if you initiate more of a democratic mode of leading, you'll get greater input and greater output.
Yeah, those are some great pieces of advice there. Backing up a bit, how would you define leadership, and then what qualities would you say a good leader possesses?
So there are multiple different forms of leadership, and you can lead as a dictator, or you can lead in a more liberal fashion. And without boring the audience with the 26 different forms of leadership that I'm aware of, I think the most important thing that I have learned being a program director is to lead individuals according to how I see them as responding to that form of leadership. And what I mean by that is that if you treat every resident the same way, you're not going to get optimal output from them. You're aware, Rex, there are certain residents in our program that I have to put my foot way up their ass to motivate them. And they'll do a great job. There are other individuals that if I were to do that to them, they would fall apart. Some individuals respond better to a hug and me telling them what they're doing well, and then I can explain to them what I need them to improve upon. The point is, you have to treat your subordinates individually in order to affect the greatest performance from him or her. If you lead in only one way, you're not going to get in the end zone as efficiently.
That's got to be tough to initially analyze the individual and figure out what type of leadership they need. And I would imagine that there's probably some sort of trial and error with those individuals too. What's the first approach you take with people when you're trying to, feel them out and figure out what type of leadership they will adjust to?
It's an excellent question. I think most importantly is you need to spend time with your teams, whether as a resident, spending time with your co-residents, or as a program director, spending time not only with your faculty and your ancillary staff, but with the residents themselves. So we do academics for about 7.5 hours a week on a Monday evening and again on a Friday morning. And I truly try to make every effort to be there for those meetings so that I'm getting a feel for the personality of each resident. I'm watching them interact with other faculty members and with their co-residents. And then I'm trying to figure out what it is about that individual that I can key into and motivate. It takes time and it takes commitment to do that, but the rewards are generous if you spend the time early and figure each resident or faculty member out.
Yeah, it seems like leaders could probably fall short by not spending enough time with the people that they're leading to figure out those small little nuances in the type of leadership skills. So that's a great takeaway point for me to keep in mind. Are there certain traits as a leader that you think could work against you? Traits that we may assume a leader has that may actually be detrimental?
Again, I think that if a leader approaches every situation the exact same way and forces their thoughts as being the most important above everyone else in the room, that's a recipe for disaster. The only times in my career that I've noticed that works most efficiently, and I can give you two clear examples. When I was in the military, in times of battle, there is no room for being democratic. You step up, you make a decision, you motivate the team, and you get them out of harm's way. And there's a parallel situation to that I've noticed, and it's in the operating room. When things are going south, you need someone to step up and take control. What I have noticed, however, is as a leader in the operating room, when things are going not as planned, I have two options at that point. I can either take ultimate control of the situation, or I can sidestep a little bit laterally and have the chief resident step up, ask him or her what he or she wants to do, and give them the freedom to correct the problem. Now, that provides me feedback in two different directions. Number one is, if that resident steps up and makes the right decision, their performance moving forward is algorithmically higher. It just explodes their self-confidence and their abilities, and I can just see them take off in a very positive direction. It gives me feedback as to how I've been educating that individual to date also. If it goes south for that split second, it also gives me feedback as to what I need to do better as a leader, as a faculty member, to make that individual stronger and independent in the operating room. So it's a benefit in multiple different directions.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You know, that when the times get tough, seeing how people react to those situations is probably pretty rewarding for you, and and the individual too, to understand that they're starting to develop into the leader that they need to be in the operating room. So it's rewarding for you, but also rewarding for them. And I can see how that could definitely make them motivated to even become a better surgeon than they are that day.
Without a doubt.
So one thing I've found very interesting, and the reason that I find this so interesting is when I became a PGY4, I felt this sudden urge to be more of a leader within the residency. And it felt very strange to me. You know, as a PGY3, you're kind of in no man's land. You're floating along, you're doing your cases, you're doing your studying, all that, but you're not really, no one really bothers you, but you're also not in charge of anything. But when you hit PGY4 year, it's a big year. What I was wondering from you is, how should I figure out my leadership style? I know you spoke about the different ways to lead, some like maybe style it towards the people that you're leading, but is there any specific way that you should find your leadership style?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can tell you that you need to have confidence in yourself, in your abilities, in your ethics, in order to be an effective leader, whether that's in an operating room, on the floor, on the trauma deck, or in your routine life. People want to be led. They want someone who's going to step up and help them, but you also want to be that individual who's going to listen to your subordinates, take what they have to say, truly to heart, and then to try to make them stronger as individuals, especially as surgeons. I think the important points are you need to listen to those around you. So take a step, understand what their points are, and then decide, yep, this individual's got it. I'm going to give them more independence, or I'm going to try to instruct this individual as to how to be stronger at doing that task in particular, whether it's in the operating room or out of the operating room. I think it's important as a PGY4 that you're a senior resident, but not a chief resident. That comes to your 5-year. In the military, we were always taught as leaders to be friendly, but there's a difference between being friendly and being friends. As a leader, you need to distinguish yourself as you're higher on the food chain. People need to listen to you and understand that you're in a different position that they're in at that point. And that leadership will continue into your chief year and then into your work as an attending physician moving forward.
Yep, I think that fine line between being friends with the residents that might be in the years below you and also being a leader can be tough to walk. You want to be respected, but you also want to be friendly because they're your colleagues, right? How do you toe that line between being taken seriously as a leader, but also being well respected as a colleague and a friend who's going to be right there working with those younger residents?
Yep. So I do the same thing when I speak to fellow faculty members. I'm very good friends with a number of faculty members that educate our residency at Rothman. And if I'm outside of work, I put on a different hat. But in work, I certainly listen to them, but I tell them flat out, at this point, I'm making comments to you as a program director and not as your friend. This is what we're going to do in the residency. This is what my expectations are of you as a faculty member. This is the way I need you to perform to educate these residents. And I think if a senior resident or a chief resident makes that initial comment to those that he's leading or that she's leading, they'll understand what hat you're wearing and they'll have a different level of respect for you. Your subordinates need to be instructed that you're not trying to run the show. You're trying to effect excellence in patient care and to do what the program director and the faculty are asking of you. So making that comment first is very important, and it'll maintain your friendship and your relationship outside of work much easier.
So it sounds like if you display what your vision is that you want to, or your goal, what your goal is to obtain, as long as you're working towards that goal and people realize that and they're willing to help with that and they'll respect you for that and understand that this is the common goal that we have to accomplish. You know, these are the reasons we're doing these things.
Correct. And again, that you are speaking on behalf of the care of patients as a senior resident or a chief resident, not as somebody who is outside of work, but making that comment up front will pay you great dividends in terms of people respecting you and following what your wishes are.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, those are all just a lot of pearls there for me to take moving forward. So what qualities do you look for in a chief resident, and how can someone become strong chief resident if they're, a PGY4 and they're going into their chief year?
Sure. Very strong academically, well-read, well-prepared. Just because you're a PGY4 or a 5 doesn't mean that you don't spend time reading the most recent literature, understanding what the goals are in an operation. You're still learning. We're all learning, and that includes myself. I expect a senior resident, a chief resident, to be unquestionably ethical in the management of patients, that there should be, in my opinion, a selfless devotion to the care of the patient. That comes before everything. To be unquestionably honest and straightforward in managing patients. I do not tolerate anyone lying to me at all. At all. We are not loading boxes for Amazon. We are caring for patients, And that's what I expect, is honesty and your greatest foot forward every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. So to change things up now, so that's the chief here. How about if you're a PGY2 or an intern? How can you become a good junior resident that is eventually going to turn into that chief resident as they move forward?
Not in any particular order, but to be very well organized throughout your PGY2 and 3 year. So in our program, my expectations are to perform better on the OITE than you did the year before, to manage your research effectively, and to continue to do research and come up with new projects, et cetera, to be well prepared for office hours and not just a body there, but someone who is participating and offering suggestions in the management of patients. In the operating room, to be extremely well prepared for that case, not showing up and asking what we're doing today. But as a lower level resident, for example, as a 1 or a 2, I expect an individual to be prepared in knowing the indications for the operation, what the anatomy is, and what the positioning of the patient is. As a 2, you need to keep those 3 things in mind, and now to understand the approach and the closure. As a 3 or a 4, you're becoming more independent in the operating room, where I'm allowing you to do more and more and more. And I'm purposely stressing you in that operating room so that you can be more efficient, understand the steps, and anticipate how to move this case into closure. As a 5, I'm expecting you to do this operation, and I am right there with you. And if you fall, I'm going to catch you and I'm going to redirect you. But I am going to expect you to understand every piece of that surgery as much as I can allow you to do safely.
Yeah, there you go. There's the step-by-step to PGY 1 to PGY 5. That's great. Yeah. So then there's the transition from being a medical student to being a resident, which is really hard. I remember being an intern and being very passive at the beginning because I'm so used to, as a medical student, just following along, studying, understanding the anatomy or whatever it may be, but then not necessarily. Now I'm a doctor and now I have to enact. So can you give us a little bit of advice for that first year, specifically that transition that occurs?
Yeah, I think it's an incredible change, and you have to have that epiphany where you're no longer Mr. or Ms. You are now doctor. You are now responsible directly for the care of a patient. And although you're going to be given instruction and recommendations how to manage this patient, the bottom line is you're now a physician, and with that comes incredible responsibility. I don't expect a PGY1 to know everything about every patient, but I do expect them to be on time for rounds, to be well prepared, to understand and to be able to communicate how that patient is done over the last 24 hours, and to come up with a treatment algorithm that they feel is best moving forward. I'm not looking for a sheep. I'm looking for someone who's going to provide input and recommendations, and then we're going to have that discussion. If I want someone to just follow along, I'm going to hire a PA. That's not what I want. I want someone who's going to be actively engaged in the management of this patient in a positive way so that we can get this patient out of the hospital and to home or off that operating room table, et cetera.
This episode has been great, Dr. Daniel. I really enjoyed it. I just want to say I'm thankful for you being my program director, for serving our country, and also sharing your expertise on leadership today. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I do want to make one last comment, Rex. Of all the hats that I've been asked to wear in the military and as a shareholder and a full professor through Rothman and at Jefferson, the most rewarding ancillary responsibility that I have, what gives me the greatest joy truly, is being a program director. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you so much. You do a great job at it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the AAOS Career Podcast, part of the Bone Beat Orthopaedic Podcast channel. Production and editing provided by MK Quinn Media. check out the video version of the podcast on the AAOS Career Podcast YouTube channel. To hear other conversations on professional development, please visit aaos.org/thebonebeat.